These crazy indictments against me should be viewed as campaign contributions to crooked Joe Biden and his radical left thugs. This will be their updated form of cheating and election interference. Remember, these are Biden indictments. They're not pure and simple. They're not coming down from heaven.
Okay, so the alternative to Biden indictments, as you call them, are pure and simple indictments that come down from heaven. Let's just kind of go over this, because I'm a little confused, and maybe it's just me. You have been indicted because you were unhappy that you lost the election. You went to court and over 60 times were told that you didn't have a leg to stand on, and the counts were recounted multiple times and you still lost. So what's the problem exactly? Is it that you're just a really bad loser and you're prepared to bring down the entire United States just to make that point? Or is it that you care nothing for the country and that saying things like this, being as explicit as this, and using language that no president in history, in any country in the Western world has ever said out loud, you think that making this kind of abuse, because that's what it is, you are abusive, making this kind of abuse part of the contemporary vernacular is somehow going to help your case? You're just an idiot and a really sore loser.
These are indictments made up by Joe Biden and the people that surround him, mostly the people that surround him. He's got a bad group. They're thugs. They're radical left fascists. They're Marxists. They're communists. They have the worst people.
Okay, so Kamala Harris is a Marxist, leftist, radical, and Karine Jean-Pierre are you out of your tiny mind? Do you not realize that Biden has around him some of the kindest-hearted people ever to work in the White House? Really good, inclusive people who care about everybody, from the very poorest and the most marginalized, right up to those who make a hell of a lot of money, and they want to make sure that the economy and that the community is balanced. That's all they're trying to do. And unfortunately, you're taking something that's working really rather well, because it's working really rather well, and you're trying to kind of criminalize it, to create language that simply isn't true. Now, I don't know who is buying this stuff from you, whether it's your base or whether you're trying to convert undecided voters, I don't know. But it's so obvious that what you're saying is untrue. And repeating it is not going to change that fact.
But these people made these indictments. So when they say, oh, Donald Trump is going to court, no. We're going to court to fight a crooked system, a corrupt system. And Democrats better be careful what they wish for, because this kind of thing can happen to them, and it can happen very quickly.
Okay, so now you're threatening anybody who tries to indict you, saying that you might indict them, and it'll happen to them very quickly. What, when you're in office, which is not going to happen? I mean, this is what confuses me so much, is that there is so much contradiction in everything that you say. Every posting that you put out, and you put out a whole bunch of these on Truth Social in the last 48 hours, you were on fire. And it's fear. You are terrified because there are 4 indictments, possibly 5, maybe even more, as you hinted to yourself in an interview the other day. I mean, you can only squeal so much until people realize that the little piggy has kind of had his day.
For the first time in 3 years, brave American patriots will be able, in court, to show how the presidential election of 2020 was rigged and stolen.
What do you mean for the first time in nearly 3 years, American patriots will be able to prove the election was rigged and stolen? You've already been in court a bazillion times. You've even had Trump judges tell you that the election was not rigged or stolen. The election was recounted multiple times. You just lost, that's all. You didn't lose by much. I mean, you should be proud of that. If you hadn't have made a whole fuss about it and just kept your mouth shut and run again 4 years later, you might stand a chance of winning. Now you stand a chance of going to prison. It's just beggars belief to me that one solitary man with an ego the size of a planet can crash an entire political and civil society. It's like he just wants to bring it down. He wants to be the last man standing. And none of his supporters will benefit from this. It's like there'll be no system left for anything. And maybe that's what they want. I mean, maybe at the end of the day, they've been complaining about government for years. Maybe they just want to crash and burn the whole federal government and just, build it in Donald Trump's image. Is that what's going to happen?
For those rhinos, radical left Democrats, communists, Marxists, fascists, and others who say, don't look back, look forward, they either do not want to reveal the answers because they got away with murder, or are fools and cowards because we know that if we don't find out the reason, it could happen again, and we're not going to let it happen again. All of the fraud, irregularities, and cheating, we cannot ever let a thing like that take place in the United States of America.
And here is further proof and evidence, if you needed it, that Donald Trump is planning another insurrection. If he loses in 2024, which is highly likely, he will then claim that it's fraud again, and the whole process will happen all over. And, there will never be a chance for Donald Trump to win, because the crazier he becomes, the more insane his musings, the fewer people are going to want to vote for him. And he doesn't seem to realize that, but that's the reality of the situation. And so, again, he'll claim there was fraud, and he'll claim that it's rigged, and he'll do the whole thing, and we'll have to just go through the whole thing, and the media will jump on it, and they'll just cover it like it's normal. And, the U.S. will never progress. The U.S. will never get out of this vicious fascist cycle of one man trying to just crash the system.
We have a Department of Injustice rigging the election for crooked Joe Biden. Unless it is quickly stopped, all future elections will follow the same path. Our country is heading down a very, very dangerous road, and it has to stop. These are very dishonest people we're dealing with.
Okay, he must be getting serious now, because the spittle is beginning to form around the dentures. So, this must mean that he means business.
We have to make our country great again. And if our elections are going to be rigged, or if they're going to use weaponization on elections, it's going to be very tough to make it great. We are a nation in decline. We are a nation that is failing, but we will turn it around very quickly. The election of 2024 is the most important election in the history of our country. We have to win, or we won't have a country left.
This kind of constant talk about making America great again, this is something I really think we should just pause and think about for a second. Because what does he actually mean? Surely in Donald Trump's mind, making America great again is just installing him as president, or as Führer, or as world king or something. That to him is where it ends. They don't have to do anything. They just have to make sure that he's the president, and then America will be great again. And sadly, from his supporters' perspective, they've kind of forgotten about all the policies and everything, and now really it's all just become about that. Just reinstalling the autocrat into his dictatorship. And, think very seriously about what life was like for you during the Donald Trump presidency, and how things changed. Because what I remember is constant riots on the streets, protests and demonstrations, from the Women's March to Black Lives Matter, people trying to make the point that police brutality is unacceptable, that women deserve the right to choose, that trying to wind the clock back 50 or 60 years, as Donald Trump was, is not acceptable in a contemporary society. There are so many things about Donald Trump's presidency that frighten me. The gassing of protesters and the disappearing of protesters in Portland, buzzing a crowd in Lafayette Square near the White House, with military helicopters, American citizens, and then being gassed so that he could do his photo op with the Bible outside a church that he'd never been to before. I mean, these are fascistic events that he creates, drama that he creates, so that it looks like there's chaos on the streets all the time, and that the great unwashed are revolting in his view. So just remember that, that is what he craves. He wants military parades. He wants to join his dictator friends, Kim Jong and Vladimir Putin and Viktor Orban. These are the people that he kind of feels aligned with. That is what he wants for America, this kind of might. And he always talks about the military that has become depleted. Well, it hasn't become depleted. Nothing has changed with the military since he was involved. And, yet he just lies about it all the time. So, you just really want to be on the right side of history when this all kind of comes to a head in November 2024, because, I remind you that whilst it might seem obvious to you that he can't win because he's crazy, he can win, and he can win because he's crazy. These things tragically work in tandem. And so if you don't want to live in this kind of dictatorship, you really need to mobilize. You need to be activated. You need to do whatever you can do as an individual to try and make the case that you don't want to live under a dictatorship. And repeating this thing of we have to win or you won't have a country left. Just so you know, he's not the president at the moment, and you do have a country, and the country's doing really well, and people are prospering, and inflation is coming down, and the jobs numbers are good, and, people seem to be having pretty good lives at the moment. Donald Trump's idea that you won't have a country left is, again, brainwashing his people, his potential voters and his sycophant fans, into thinking that if it's not Trump's way, then there is no other way. You see, it's a very interesting play. You won't have a country left. He used that same language at the Stop the Steal rally when he invited his mob to come and break down the doors of the US Capitol building and said he would be there with them, and of course he wasn't. And so, you just need to remember that if you keep a ledger of all of this language, you'll see that none of it adds up, and that really most of what he says is just performative and has no value in reality. And as time moves on, and as these court dates get closer, he will become more fascistic with his language. He will become more abusive towards the other side, towards his opponents. His critique and his anger will only rise. And, that is very dangerous because already the language is frightening. But my fear is that as he kind of increases the temperature, as we get closer to the election and closer to his court dates, that's when you're going to see kind of bad actors on his behalf take matters into their own hands. And, he is now inciting domestic terrorism, whether it be in code or in clear language. People receive these messages in their own way. But I just want to remind you that it is unsafe having a politician, somebody who has held office and is respected by 70 million voters the last time round, that, the words that he says matters. And he doesn't care anymore. He's not heeding the advice of his lawyers. He's not taking the diktat from the judges or the district attorneys on what he can and can't say to prejudice cases. He is going for it. And it is going to become more and more explicit, and in the process be more and more dangerous for the rest of us wanting to live in a peaceful, civilized society. I'm Anthony Davis. You can hear me every day on the 5-Minute News podcast, on Wednesdays hosting America Uncovered, and on Sundays on The Weekend Show with Midas Touch.